Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, in light of the current pandemics around the world, I want to take a little bit of time to do an extra series of videos, and we're going to intermingle these around other things. I want to try to not interfere with the regular video schedules as well, so these will probably not be edited a whole lot. But what I do want to do is, I see so much media hype going on. I see a lot of fear-mongering, particularly among some popular hosts. I see a lot of people shilling false thoughts and false assumptions. I see media and journalists, like usual, reading something in a scientific literature, having no idea how to interpret it. And so what I want to do here is I want to go through the actual, real, primary medical literature with you. Now, we're going to start out, and I'm going to use the same introduction for all of these videos in this series. Again, we're going to try and do regular Linux videos in addition to doing these. These are just for more information to counteract a lot of the crazy hysteria that's running around. Now, we'll start out, of course, disclosures. I'm not your medical doctor. Talk to your medical doctor. Nothing I say is going to be taken as advice. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because, in case you are unaware, I actually hold a PhD in molecular toxicology. I spent a long time looking at biomedical pathways, understanding the medicine inside the peer-reviewed journal articles, all sorts of things like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a journal article on each one of these, and we're going to explain what the primary literature says. Because several scientists who are on the forefront of researching this, and I'm not, I can read and interpret this stuff, but I make my living in other ways these days. But there are a lot of people who are day to day living the research who are saying we are overreacting. We're wrecking economies. We're wrecking our lives for effectively what amounts to, in many ways, a nothing burger. And to count this out, I want to look at a series of articles. So that is the introduction I'm going to use on all these videos, so I don't have to keep saying that. So we'll talk about the article in a second. All right, so on to our article for today. This is coming from the Journal of the American Medical Association, a very long-term and prestigious journal in the medical community. This is written by 3 physicians, a medical doctor, PhD, and 2 medical doctors, Onder, Reza, and is it Brucifero, I believe? My apologies if I do not have these right. This is from March 23rd, 2020. In the Journal of the American Medical Association, and it is called Case Fatality Rate and Characteristics of Patients Dying in Relation to COVID-19 in Italy. Now, I want to start out by saying one of the challenges that we have in this article here is to look at how sometimes numbers are fudged in science to push certain agendas. And this article is going to seek to counteract that. For a good example of this, back around 2000 or so, the CDC in USA came out with a big report saying obesity is killing millions. And what they did is they did a little bit of hanky-panky with the numbers. And the first thing that they did with all of their numbers is, they changed the definition of obesity. Obesity used to be defined and measured on a system where we would use calipers, and it was very uncomfortable for all these kids in gym class to have a partner, and you're grabbing parts of your skin and you're measuring these calipers on various parts and stuff like this. And it was a longer and a tedious measure, and CDC replaced that around that time with the standard BMI, which is nothing more than a height to weight ratio, causing nearly every professional athlete to be immediately classified as obese. I kid you not. You can look it up. But then they came out with a report shortly after saying all of these people are dying of obesity. Well, what happened is anybody who died, if they happened to be obese, based on this new definition of obesity of a BMI over, I think it was over 28 or something, therefore they all died of obesity. So if you're driving down the road, some fool runs a red light, smashes into a car, you die in a car accident, but you happen to have obesity, the CDC said you died of obesity. Well, that seems to be what's going on in a lot of these. All these people are dying from coronavirus. There's actually an article out by a German physician who basically looked at this and saying this is a serious problem, is how all these cases are done. And so when I read this article, it was a fascinating article because Italy is being pushed up as saying this is what's coming to us, brace yourself, this is coming. Because we all know Italy's just falling over dead left, right, and center. Maybe not. So this article looks at what's going on in Italy. So we start out, some of these articles, I'll read the whole thing. Some of them I'm going to be summarizing sections. This is a fairly short article, and so we are going to just kind of read it. This is a viewpoint. It says only three cases of coronavirus disease 2019, which is COVID-19, were identified in Italy in the first half of February 2020. All these involved people who had recently traveled to China. On February 20th, a severe case of pneumonia due to SARS-CoV-2, a severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2, was diagnosed in northern Italy's Lombardy region in a man in his 30s who had no history of possible exposure abroad. Within 14 days, many other cases of COVID-19 in the surrounding area were diagnosed, including a substantial number of critically ill patients. On the basis of the number of cases and the advanced stages of the disease, it was hypothesized that the virus would be circulating within the population since January. Interesting. Another cluster of patients with COVID-19 was simultaneously identified in Veneto. My apologies if I do not pronounce these towns right. I am not Italian, nor have I ever been there. Which borders Lombardy. Since then, a number of cases identified in Italy has rapidly increased, mainly in the northern Italy, but all regions of the country have reported having patients with COVID-19. After China, Italy now has the second largest number of COVID cases. That's been surpassed. And also has a very high case fatality rate. This viewpoint reviews the Italian experience with COVID-19 with an emphasis on fatalities. Now, what we're looking at here is one of the challenges they're going to say is they're saying, do we really have as big of a deal as they're saying we have, or is it something else? So that's what we're going to be looking at. So the first is surveillance systems and overall fatality rate. As an outset to the COVID-19 outbreak, the Italian National Institute of Health, ISS, launched a surveillance system to collect information on all people with COVID-19 through the country. Data on all COVID-19 cases were obtained from all 19 regions and the two autonomous provinces, Trento and Bolzano. COVID-19 cases were identified by reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reactions. This is called RT-PCR. This is actually, RT-PCR was an emerging technology when I was in grad school, and actually I used it quite a bit. So the idea what you're doing in RT-PCR, so first PCR, polymerase chain reaction, this is a way to test and amplify for DNA. So you take a DNA sample, you drop it in a little tube, and then you go ahead and run it through a system, and what it's going to do is it's going to cycle up, maintain all of the machinery. You're basically going to put all the machinery in a cell required to create a DNA strand from a pre-existing one. You're going to put everything in, and then through a series of temperature changes, cycles, and sequences, you will allow whatever small, tiny sample of DNA to be amplified to the point where you can study it and measure it. Okay, now RT-PCR, this is a novel type of PCR back in the day I was in grad school, which was going back almost 15 years now. This is a thing where in each cycle, you're also measuring how quickly the DNA grows, which will tell you how much of a certain tactic is there compared to other things. So that's the method that they're using. It's a very well-established method of determining things nowadays. So that's how you would detect for a virus. And it can detect viruses in very small quantities. Okay, so the fatality rate was defined as a number of deaths in persons who tested positive for SARS-CoV-2 divided by the number of SARS-CoV-2 cases. The overall fatality rate with persons with confirmed COVID-19 in the Italian population based on up-to-date data up to March 17th was 7.2%, which was 1,625 deaths to 22,512 cases. This rate is higher than that observed in many other countries and may be related to three factors. So they're saying this is a high rate. The question is, what caused such a high rate? That's our question. Number one, fatality rate and population age. This is critically important. So when we start hearing there's all these problems in Italy, remember this. Demographic characteristics of the Italian population differ from other countries. In other words, their population density mass is different. In 2019, approximately 23% of the Italian population was age 65 and older. COVID-19 is more lethal in older patients, so the older age distribution in Italy may explain, in part, the higher case fatality rate compared to that in other countries. So they have a table here compared to China. So looking at this is China deaths as of February 11th compared to Italian deaths as of March 17th. Total number of deaths. So the total number of deaths here is from 0 to 29 years of age. Italy had 0. No deaths at all. Ages 30 to 39, they had 4 deaths, which is 0.3% case fatality rate. So if you got it, 0.3% chance of death. 40 to 49, they had a total of 10 deaths, which is 0.4% case fatality rate. 50 to 59 has 43 deaths, a 1.0% case fatality rate. Ages 60 to 69, 139 deaths, which is a 3.5 case fatality rate. 70 to 79 had 578 deaths, which was a 12.8% case fatality. And greater than 80 was 850 deaths, which is a 20.2% case fatality rate. Now, China compared having a 0.2 rate all the way up to age 50, which case it went from a 1.3, then a 3.6 up to 70, an 8.0 up to 80, and a 14.8 higher than that. So we can actually see that even among the age ranges, Italy seemed to have a higher death rate than others. So there was another factor looking at this, and that's what they looked at next. The overall case fatality rate in Italy, which is 7.2, is substantially higher than China's 2.3, which is actually almost double that what it is. In fact, I think it's over double that what it is here in the United States even today. When data were stratified by the age group, the Italy and China appear similar up to ages 70, but the rates are higher in Italy among individuals age 70 and higher, particularly among those 80 years and old. This difference is difficult to explain. The distribution of cases is very different in the two countries. Now, they have a little bit here. We're not going to belabor this point any longer. We're going to jump into the second reason for errors, mostly because my camera battery is flashing me that's about to die. And the chart detailed for us a lot of fascinating things. Second explanation is how the deaths are identified. In case fatality statistics in Italy based on defining COVID-19 related deaths as those occurring in patients who test positive. In other words, it's the same thing the CDC did in 2000. If you happen to die by any cause and you were fat, obesity caused your death. That's exactly how Italy has been reporting this, which is a wrong way to report the numbers. This is what that German physician's, I can't remember his name or the video, but that's what the German physician's video indicated. He said, hey guys, you're not doing this right, because in the EU and in many other Western nations, it is written into the law you're not allowed to do that, but they keep on doing that, and it causes hype. Causes, oh my God, all these people are dying from it. Have they really died from it, or have they died and happened to have it? That's a good question. So case fatality statistics are based on defining COVID-19 as those occurring in patients who tested positive via RT-PCR independently from pre-existing diseases that may have caused death. This method was selective because clear criteria for defining COVID-19 related deaths is not available. Electing to define it this way may have resulted in an overestimation of the case fatality rate. A subsample of 355 patients with COVID-19 who died in Italy underwent detailed chart review. Among these patients, the mean age was 79.5. So in other words, they had, of 355 patients, 79.5 was the average age with a standard deviation of 8.1. That means within, I'm guessing this is a 95% confidence interval. So 95% of them were between ages 71 and 87. Okay, which would what that would be. 30% of them were women. All right. So in the sample, 117 patients, which is 30%, had ischemic heart disease. 126 patients, 35.5, had diabetes. 72 patients had active cancer. That's 20% of these COVID-19 cases had active cancer. 87% had arterial fibrillation. 24 patients, which is 6.8%, have dementia. 34, which is 9.6, had a history of stroke. The mean number of pre-existing diseases was 2.7. In other words, of everybody had, with a 95% confidence interval, had 2.7 diseases. In other words, everyone had multiple diseases, almost all of them. So overall, only 0.8% of all patients who died had no disease. 89 of them had a single disease, which is 25%. 25.6%, had two diseases. 172 of them, which is 48.5%, had three or more underlying diseases. The presence of these comorbidities might have increased the rate of morbidity dependent. In other words, all these people had a lot of diseases and then they get COVID-19. COVID-19 is blamed for the cause of the death, even if that may not have been a way to go. Now, the third possible explanation is for the variety of testing, how they're testing strategies. Third possibility is country-specific case fatality rates is the different strategies using to test for the virus with RT-PCR. After an initial extensive testing strategy, both symptomatic and asymptomatic contacts of infected patients in very early stages of the epidemic, on February 25th, the Italian Ministry of Health issued more stringent policies. This recommendation prioritized testing for people with more clinical symptoms. In other words, tests are limited, so we're only testing people who had more clinical symptoms. So more people who definitely had it got tested, so it bolstered the number of those who died with the infection. In other words, that would cause the mortality rate to go up. All right. So this recommendation prioritized testing for patients with more clinical severities, symptoms who are susceptible as having COVID-19 and required hospitalization. Testing was limited for asymptomatic people or who had limited or mild symptoms. So if you came and you had mild symptoms or no symptoms, you just wouldn't be tested. Testing strategy resulted in a high proportion of positive results, i.e. 19.3% positive cases, which was 21,157 out of 109,000 tests. As of March 14th, and an apparent increase in the case fatality rate because patients who presented with less severe clinical disease and therefore had a lower fatality rate were no longer tested. Okay, the more mild cases with low fatality rate were no longer counted in the denominator that would drive the mortality rate up. In conclusion, the current data illustrate that Italy has a high proportion of older patients with confirmed COVID-19 infection, and that older populations in Italy may partly explain differences in cases and case fatality rates among countries. Within Italy, COVID-19 deaths are mainly observed among older male patients who also have multiple comorbidities. However, these data are limited and were derived from the first month of documented cases in Italy. In addition, some patients who are currently infected may die in the near future, which may change the morbidity pattern. From a research perspective, the comparisons discussed highlight the need for transparency in testing policies with clear reporting and denominators used to calculate case fatality rates in the age, sex, and clinical comorbid status of affected persons when comparing COVID-19 case and mortality rates between different countries and regions. Finally, because the outbreak is new, continued surveillance with transparent and accurate reporting of patient characteristics and testing policies is needed from multiple countries to better understand the global epidemiology of COVID-19. So, what is our final take-home message? Our final take-home message here is, even in a lot of these countries, it's not nearly as bad as it's being promoted as it's going to be. I have serious concerns with the Johns Hopkins charts and other charts that are being used to tell us what is going on here. Now, ultimately, maintaining a little bit of more social distance, maintaining a little bit more sanitation is absolutely going to help in the midst of it. But some predictions by some epidemiologists say this has probably already gone through and immunized most of the population as it is. And so continuing to lock everything down is possibly more of a hindrance than a help. That is what the report from Italy seems to suggest. So take it with that. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of hope that this is not going to be the end of the world. Just calm down a little bit, use a little bit of caution, and don't be crazy. Let me know if you like this video. I'll go ahead and link the article in the description down below. Excuse me, in the link in the description down below. So go ahead and have a look at that. Read this for yourself if you can, and understand that there is a lot of information out there, and we're not going to do good if we just dismiss anything that we don't want to hear, because there are weird cases like Italy, there are weird cases like New York, but most of the rest of the places, we're not seeing a lot of serious issues with this. We'll cover some more articles about this in the future. Let me know your thoughts on this series in the comments down below.